Now, here the Gemara is going to talk about this father who's celebrating the wedding of his son and giving homage to the deity. Kol Tlosin Yom. For the first 30 days after the wedding, Bein Amar Le Machmas Hilula, Ubein Lo Amar Machmas Hilula, if he invites you to come to a celebration, and he may say it's in honor of the marriage, maybe he won't even tell you it's in honor of the marriage. Also, you have to assume that it's in honor of the marriage, and whenever the father makes a great spread and celebrates his son's wedding, you should know that it's going to bring him to homage for his deity. But mikan v'elch, after 30 days, if he invites you to some celebration and the food is kosher, it depends whether he says if this is because of the celebration of his son's wedding. I mean, 10 years after his son's wedding, he invites you to a celebration in honor of his son's wedding. Then you're not allowed to go? Papa will give you up to 12 months. Up to 12 months, he might be celebrating his son's marriage. So now, when the celebrations begin, they don't begin with the ceremony itself. Already beforehand, they're preparing for the ceremony. That's also participating in Avoda Zara. And the Gemara says, when they put the hops into the barley, and that's part of the beer making, into the vats, and that's part of the beer making process, that's already considered the beginning of the celebration of the wedding. And then from that point on, don't even think of sending him gifts and making business offers and so forth and so on, because the celebrations have begun. Now, I was disappointed here because I didn't find a footnote, but I think there are parallel halachas in our Jewish law about when the simcha. For example, if anybody has access to the news, you tell me why I've heard about 30 planes in the last 20 minutes. I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's a fire, chas v'shalom, in there. There's another one. I don't know. I guess we'll find out after the shir. Doesn't sound very good to me. But I think also, I'm just mentioning on the side that I think with regard to Sheva Brachos and so forth and so on, and the mitzvah being Sameach Chos V'Kal begins when they put the barley soaking into the vat in order to manufacture beer. Ulabasar Tresa Yachi Shata Shari. What if he invites you to a celebration after 12 months? Are you telling me that even though he tells you it's he's commemorating his son's wedding, you're allowed to go? He once went to the home of a certain pagan, and Labasa Tracy Yachashat after 12 months of the year, and then Vishame de Ode, he heard him give homage to his deity, Upiresh Velocha. And without eating, he just checked out. So you see that even after 12 months, you're not supposed to be there, to eat and participate with a feast that celebrates and commemorates, even after 12 months, the wedding of his son. So when it's a Shani Rav Yitzchak Breder of Meshasha, we don't have to learn from him because he's different. He's in a different category. And the idol worship is so impressed with the fact that this prominent person, namely Rabbi Yitzchak, showed up for his celebration that he begins to, pay homage to his idol. But in the case of an ordinary Jew, well, if a year has lapsed, then the idol worship is not going to react to that Jew, that Yid showing up at the celebration, such that he's going to give homage to his deity. Okay, fine. Gemara asks, my crust season. What holiday is this thing called? Omer Yehuda Omer Shmuel Yom Shetofsa Bo Romi Malchus. In other words, the Malchus was initially in the hands of other kingships. Maybe it was Persia, maybe it was Greece. We'll have to see the Gemara. But when the Romans finally took over, the Romans were the epitome of idol worship, idolatry, and they would certainly celebrate the day on which they seized sovereignty. That day is called Cresistim, and it's a day of idol worship. Now, Tanya, the Gemara asks from a brisa, Kra Tisin v'yom shetofsabo Romi Malchus. The word vav, the vav indicates that there are two things here. There's Krastin, and then there's the day in which Rome seized the sovereignty. Omer Rav Yosef shtei tfisos tofsa Rome. Twice, Rome rose to sovereignty, meaning they basically took over the entire world. Achas b'mei Cleopatra Malka, during the days of Cleopatra. V'achas shetofsa b'mei Yevonim, and later on, actually, I don't think it's later on. I think it was the order, the chronology is reversed here. He says in the note here, the Romans under Augustus defeated Cleopatra of Egypt, of Alexandria, at the Battle of Actium, 21 BCE, and they seized her entire kingdom. So the festival of Krasisim celebrates this victory over Cleopatra, the queen of Alexandria. Now, when did they control and seize the sovereignty? During the days of the Greeks. So apparently this happened, as the Gemara says later on at Daf Tes, 206 years before the destruction of Bayis Sheni, and that date would have been, in the years of creation, 3623, which is equal to 138 BCE. Okay, again, we're not going to go into all the details. So really, in truth, the victory of the Romans over the Greeks took place before their victory over Cleopatra. However, since the Mishnah mentions Krastisin first, that's why it's mentioned first. Anyway, Techiyasa Rav Dimi Omar, Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel. He said, "Tlasinu train krave avdi romi bahadi yivani." The Romans fought for 32 battles against the Greeks. They could not subdue the Greeks until they created some sort of a pact of partnership with Klal Yisrael, with the people of Israel, and that's when they were able to defeat Greeks. So this apparently should coincide with the time in which the Hashmonaim overtook the Greeks, and they got rid of the Greeks. And if you don't believe me, you'll have to hear the songs of the Maccabees. Anyway, V'hochi asnu b'adayu. They made a pact with the Jewish people. Iminan malchi, if the kings will come from us, then minaychu hi pachri. Parche are the governors. The Jews will be the governors. V'iminaychu malchi, and if the kings will come from you, then minan haparchi, the governors will come from us. V'sholchu lahu, they sent a message to the Yevonim, and I guess, I'm not sure, but I think the purpose of this message is going to be whether or not the Greeks will be freaked out, so to speak, by the fact that the Jews entered into a pact with the Romans. Rabbi Rhodes, by chance, did you find out anything? I don't know. It's such unbelievable what's going on over here. This I never heard, even during, I don't know, maybe it's an exercise. I don't know. Got to check. Okay, I'm very, very eager. Okay. Ad ha'idna avidna bekrova. right? We had a battle with you for 32 battles. Hashta navid bedinu. Let's sit down and try to reason this out. Margolius v'evan tova. These are all symbolic words. So you have a pearl and a precious stone. A precious stone is worth a lot more than a pearl. Ezeman yaseb bosis lechavero, well, which is less important, and therefore it should be a basis, like a setting in which you put the most important thing. Ishalchula, the Greeks responded, Margolis li even tova. The Margolis, the pearl, is worth less, and let it be a setting for the precious stone, which is worth more. Even tova vi enoch. Okay, there's something called an enoch, which is in English called a carbuncle. Ezu mehen yasa basa havero even tova li enoch. So apparently enoch is more valuable than an even tova. Enoch v'sefer Torah. Okay, here's a hint to the Jewish people. Ezu ben yasa basa havero. Meaning, do you Greeks recognize the significance of the Jewish Torah? And the Greeks responded, Enoch l'sefer Torah. Right, this Enoch, which is even more valuable than the Emin Tova, which is even more valuable than the Margolis, should be the setting for the Sefer Torah. Sholchalahu, the Romans sent to them, Imkain Anan Sefer Torah Gabon, V'Yisrael Bahadon Kofilahu. Anan Sefer Torah Gabon. Gabon means by us, Legabeanu. We have a Sefer Torah with us, meaning the people of Israel. They're with us. They have signed a pact with us. The Yisrael Ba'adan. I mean, if we have the Torah scroll with us, then we have Israel with us. And therefore, by your own admission, this new pact and this addition of Klal Yisrael is more important than the pearls and the precious stones and the tabernacle, whatever it's called, carbuncle. Okay. Okay, he had a footnote here about these different kinds of precious objects, but for some reason, I don't find it right now. Okay. Oh, here he has it. He says that in the Nevuah of Daniel, there were 4 Malchios that would rule the world. Babylon, that's Bavel, Persia, and Greece. And these 3 kingdoms are represented here by the pearl, the precious stone, and the carbuncle. The 4th kingdom, beyond Bavel, Persia, and Yavan, is Rome. And Rome is saying that they can defeat the 3rd kingdom, which is Yavan, by virtue of their alliance with Israel. For 26 years, the Romans were honest and faithful to the people of Israel. After the 26 years, they subjugated the Jewish people. Probably the worst subjugation that we ever experienced. Meikar my Dorish. Why did they think during the first 26 years they should, how should I say, keep their faith with Israel? Meikar Dorish. Okay, now here we have another symbolism. We've got Esav and Yaakov. Rome is Esav, and Klal Yisrael is Yaakov. And you remember the confrontation, Parshas Vayishlach, between Yaakov and Esav. And Esav says to Yaakov, Nisav and Elcha, let's travel on together, Elcha and Egecha. So it means that Esav representing Rome, was considered himself equal to Yaakov. However, Lebasof Darush, and again, I don't know if you take this Gemara literally, but later on, they quoted a different pasuk in the same confrontation, in which Yaakov, so to speak, kowtows to Esau. Yavar no Adoni lifnei Avda. So Yaakov says to Esau, you go first. You're the leader. And we have a principle called Maisa Ava Samin Labanim, and this historically means that Esau is going to subjugate the Jewish people. We kowtow to Esau. Take back 52 plains. Esrim v'shishinin dekamu b'emnusei b'hadi Yisrael minolam. Is there a source to prove that the Romans were loyal to the pact with Israel for 26 years? The Omer of Kahana, Kishachol Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi, Sholchule. Now, Rabbi Yossi, the father of Rabbi Shmuel, was a great Tana. And the people knew that a lot of what his teachings were gone because the only one who had his teachings was Rabbi Shmuel, his son. Rebbe, and Lanu, tell us at least 2 or 3 things that you received from your father, Rabbi Yosef. So he responds, 180 years before the Bayis Sheni was destroyed, Pashta Malchus Harshal Yisrael, the evil kingdom of Rome, ruled and subjugated and persecuted the Jewish people for 180 years before the actual Churban. Shmonim Shona Achlo Charav Habayis, during the 80-year period before the actual Churban, which is 100 years into the rule of Rome over Israel, Gazru Tumal Eretz Ha'am Vel Kleis Chuchas. At that point in time, this is a little bit of a digression, the Rabbanon instituted the Gzeira of Tumas Akum because the Goyim at that point in history did not mark the kever. They didn't have a tzion kever, so you didn't know whether you're walking over bones of the dead. And therefore, if you go to Eretz Amin, you're Tomei. And al Kleis Chuchas. They made a Gzeira that although the Torah says that Kleis Chuchas, glassware, are not Makabal Tuma, we will consider them as if they were Makabal Tuma. Arboim Shonat Shalacharv, in the last 40 years before the destruction, that's 140 years beyond the beginning of the sovereignty of Rome over subjugating the Jewish people. Golsa Sanhedrin Yoshva Lo B'chanus. Now, Sanhedrin had to sit in the Lishkas HaGozis outside the Mikdash, but for the 40 years before the Churban, they went to a place called Chanus, and that's where they were in Golus. And they lost, to some extent, their status as the High Court of Israel, as Sanhedrin Gdolah, for example. They couldn't put murderers to death with a death penalty. They couldn't impose any penalties, financial penalties, we'll call knossos. They couldn't, in those 40 years, judge people for penalties like kefil for ganov, dalvei, etc., etc. Dine knossos sal kedaitov. From Rav Yehuda Marav Beram Zochros Oisha Tov Rav Yehuda Ben Bava Shmo Shel Moli Hu Nishtachu Dine Knos Yisrael. So now we get to the sugya of Rav Yehuda Ben Bava. Now, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was one of the Haruge Malchus. He was murdered by the Romans mercilessly. And the reason he was put to death by the Romans officially is because he violated their gzeira that the Jewish people are not allowed to give smicha. And he gave smicha to 5 of the great Tanoim. Had he not done so, we would have lost the whole Masorah. Nishtachu l'girsayu. In other words, what does it mean that if not for Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, we would have forgotten the Torah? It means we could always study the Torah. It means we would have completely abolished the laws of penalties, because for that we need smuchim ish mipi ish, unbroken chain going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. What did the Romans decree? Kol asomechi hari. Anyone who gives smicha, meaning from the musmachim who passes on smicha, will be put to death. Kol anismachi hareg. Anyone who accepts the smicha will be put to death. Any city within which smicha was given would be completely destroyed. And the outer boundaries of a city within which smicha would be given would be destroyed. He knew that he had to continue smicha, otherwise if smicha would break down, you could never be mechadish smicha, except for the Rambam Shita as a unique Shita. But he went out, so there are no cities around. He was hoping the Romans wouldn't find out about it. And he sat down, right? There were no cities that bordered on this area because it was between two mountains. And it was outside the parameter of Alpayim Amma, outside the boundaries of these two cities. And it was Bein Ushal and Sharafram. Besamach Sham, he gave smicha to chamishas, came to 5 elders. Who were they? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. Now, according to another opinion, there was a 6th Tana, Rabbi Arvia Mosif Af Rabbi Nechem. Fine. Keva and Shehi Kiru Ba'ovi. However, tragically, the Roman cursed enemies got wind of this. Amar lahem. So Yehuda ben Beseira turns to the 5 young scholars, and he says to him, Banai, my sons, Rutsu, save yourself. I'm an old man, I can't save myself. Amrulo, they responded, Rebbe, what's going to be with you? The Romans are going to find you. They'll put you to death. They could do whatever we want with me, but I'm a rock. A rock doesn't feel pain. Amru, and it was said, apparently this was the Masorah, this was the tradition. They shot 300 iron spears into his body. Asula gufa kavra. His body was like a sieve full of holes. In any event, we want to emphasize here, because we have to finish up, that these 5 chachamim lived after the Churban Abayis. And yet Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava is credited with assuring the continued application of Dinei Knossos through them. So this is against what we said before, that in order to be done Dinei Knossos, you had to be in the Sanhedrin Agdol had to be in Lishkas HaGazis, and now for 40 years before the Churban, they were already, in Golus, they already moved from the Lishkas HaGazis into the Chanus. Omer Rav Nachman Yitzchak lo tema Dinei Knossos ela shelo donu Dinei Nefashos. They couldn't judge Dinei Nefashos. My timer, why can't they judge Dinei Nefashos? Kevan dechazu nefisha l'rotzchem lo yochel l'meida. This is a very shocking Gemara, but we do have the sugya in Yoma that says that the destruction of the second bias was before the 3 averos. No. Actually, the first bias, so 3 averos chamuros, and one of them was shvichas damim, and they were unable to judge all the murderers. There was such a proliferation of murderers that they couldn't possibly judge them all. Amru mutav nigle l'mokum mokum ki heichadol l'chayfa. Best that we go into Golus, pick up from the Lishkas HaGazis, so that we cannot maintain that status as the Sanhedrin Agdola that would be guilty if we don't judge and condemn and put to death murderers. How do we know that a Sanhedrin is dependent upon Mokom, that they have to be in the Mokom of Lishkas HaGazis? Because the Pasuk says, so they've got to be in that Mokom, which is called Lishkas HaGazis. Now, the Gemara said that the Romans for 26 years were faithful to the Jewish people. And the Gemara had quoted Rabbi Shmuel in the name of Rabbi Yossi that the Romans ruled over Eretz Yisrael, and it began 180 years before the Churban Abayis of the Bayis Sheni. Meo Shmona V'Sulo. Could it be that the Romans ruled over Eretz Yisrael for only 180 years before the Churban? For Atani Rabbi Yossi Berevi, we have a brisa that says that Malchus Paras Bifnei Abayis Shloshim V'Arba Shonim, that the Persian kingdom, which ruled Eretz Yisrael during the period of Bayis Sheni, right? That's the period of what's his name, of Cyrus. Did I get that right? What was his name? Of Koresh. Is Malchus Yavan Bifnei Abayis Meo Ushmonim Shana. So it means the Greeks ruled over the kingdom of Israel during the Second Temple period for 180 years. And Malchus Chashmonaim Bifnei Abayis Mea Ushalosh. So it's all during the period of Bayis Sheni. 103 years was Malchus Chashmonaim. On the other hand, Malchus Beis Hordus Mea V'Shalosh. So I guess if you add all this together, you get 420. I don't know, figure it out. The years of Roman influence were 206 years. How could you say that 180? Okay, so this, this needs a lot more work. We'll have to leave it for today. And I'll thank you and wish you a great Shabbos. Thank you so much. So in Mirza Shem on Sunday, we should be good for 9:30. Let me know if that's not good.